My name is Jack, and I am a detective. Not the kind you see in movies with fancy cars and high-tech gadgets, but a simple man who solves problems for people in my small town. I've been doing this job for 10 years now, and every day brings something new, sometimes exciting, sometimes frustrating, but always interesting. This is my story. It all started one rainy Monday morning. The sky was gray, and the streets were wet from the night's downpour. My office is on the second floor of an old building downtown. It's nothing fancy, just a desk, a chair, some filing cabinets, and a coffee machine that makes terrible coffee. But it's mine, and I like it that way. I sat at my desk, sipping my bad coffee and flipping through yesterday's notes when the phone rang. "Hello," I said, picking up the receiver. "Mr. Jack?" "Please, I need your help," came a shaky voice on the other end. It was a woman, and she sounded scared. "What's wrong?" I asked, sitting up straighter. "It's my son," she said. "He's missing." Her name was Mrs. Carter, and she lived just outside of town. She explained that her 8-year-old boy, Tommy, hadn't come home after school the previous afternoon. At first, she thought he might be playing with friends, but when he didn't show up by dinner time, she began to worry. By midnight, she called the police, but they told her not to panic. It wasn't unusual for kids to stay out late without telling their parents. Still, Mrs. Carter couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I agreed to meet her at her house later that morning. Before leaving, I grabbed my notebook, a pen, and my raincoat. The weather hadn't improved, if anything, it had gotten worse. The drive to Mrs. Carter's place took about 20 minutes. Her house was small but cozy, surrounded by tall trees that swayed in the wind. When she opened the door, I could see the worry etched on her face. "Thank you for coming," she said, ushering me inside. We sat in her living room while she told me more about Tommy. He was a bright kid, loved dinosaurs and puzzles, and had no enemies that she knew of. His routine was predictable. He walked home from school every day, stopping only to chat with his best friend, Billy, who lived 2 doors down. Billy's mom confirmed that Tommy had left their house around 4 p.m. heading straight for home. After that, no one had seen him. After hearing Mrs. Carter's story, I decided to retrace Tommy's steps. Starting at Billy's house, I followed the route he would have taken to get home. It was a quiet neighborhood, with houses spaced far apart and plenty of woods nearby. As I walked, I kept an eye out for anything unusual, a dropped toy, a torn piece of clothing, anything that might give me a clue. About halfway between Billy's house and Mrs. Carter's, I noticed something odd. A narrow path led into the woods, barely visible unless you were looking for it. Curious, I stepped off the main road and followed the trail. The deeper I went, the darker it became. Rain dripped steadily through the leaves above, making the ground muddy underfoot. Then, I saw it, a red backpack lying half-hidden behind a tree. I picked it up carefully. It was Tommy's. Inside, I found his lunchbox, a dinosaur coloring book, and a note from his teacher praising him for good behavior. My heart sank. Whoever had taken Tommy must have forced him to leave his bag here. I marked the spot with a stick so I could find it again later, then turned back toward Mrs. Carter's house. When I returned, Mrs. Carter burst into tears upon seeing the backpack. "That's Tommy's," she cried. "What does this mean? Where is he?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But we'll figure it out." The next step was talking to the neighbors. Most of them hadn't seen or heard anything unusual, but one elderly woman mentioned seeing a strange car parked near the edge of the woods earlier that week. She described it as a blue sedan with a dent on the passenger side door. That was enough for me to go on. Back in town, I visited local garages and mechanics, asking if anyone had seen a car matching that description. Finally, at the third garage, a mechanic nodded. "Yeah, I remember that car," he said. "Guy came in last week complaining about engine trouble. Said his name was Mr. Smith. Do you have an address?" I asked. The mechanic checked his records and gave me a location. It was a run-down apartment complex on the outskirts of town. Armed with this information, I headed there immediately. The building looked abandoned, its windows boarded up and paint peeling. I knocked on the door of the unit listed for Mr. Smith. No answer. Peering through a crack in the boards covering the window, I spotted movement inside. Carefully, I pushed open the front door, which was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled musty, and the furniture was covered in dust. In the corner of the living room, I saw a pile of blankets, and beneath them, a small figure curled up asleep. It was Tommy. "Tommy!" I whispered urgently, shaking him gently. His eyes fluttered open, and he stared at me in confusion. "Who are you?" he asked groggily. "I'm Jack, a friend of your mom's," I said. "You're safe now." Tears filled his eyes as he hugged me tightly. "I want to go home," he murmured. As I led Tommy outside, I called the police to report what I'd found. They arrived quickly, taking statements from both of us. Later, they arrested Mr. Smith, a man with a history of petty crimes, who confessed to kidnapping Tommy because he mistakenly thought the boy's family had money. Reuniting Tommy with his mother was one of the happiest moments of my career. She sobbed with relief, hugging her son like she'd never let go. "Thank you, Mr. Jack," she said repeatedly. "Thank you." In the days that followed, news of the rescue spread throughout the town. People thanked me, praised me, even offered me free meals at restaurants. But none of that mattered to me. What mattered was knowing that I'd helped bring a child back to his family. Since then, I've solved many cases, some big, some small, but none quite as memorable as Tommy's. Being a detective isn't always glamorous, and it certainly isn't easy. There are long hours, dead ends, and moments of doubt. But there are also moments of triumph, like finding a lost child or bringing justice to those who deserve it. Those moments make everything worthwhile. Now, whenever I sit at my desk sipping bad coffee and staring out at the rain-soaked streets, I remind myself why I do this job. It's not for fame or fortune, it's for people like Mrs. Carter and Tommy, who need someone to believe in them and fight for them. And as long as there are mysteries to solve and people to help, I'll keep doing what I do best, being a detective. Every case teaches me something new. Sometimes it's about human nature, how fear can drive people to do terrible things, or how kindness can inspire acts of bravery. Other times, it's about myself, what I'm capable of, where my limits lie, and how far I'm willing to go to get answers. Each story adds another layer to my understanding of the world, shaping me into a better version of myself. One such case involved a stolen painting. It belonged to an elderly man named Mr. Peterson, who ran a small art gallery in town. The painting wasn't worth much monetarily, but it held sentimental value. It was a gift from his late wife. When it disappeared, Mr. Peterson was devastated. He came to me distraught, clutching a photograph of the artwork. "Please, Mr. Jack," he pleaded. "This means everything to me. I promise to do my best." My investigation led me to a group of teenagers who frequented the gallery, admiring the art but unable to afford it. One of them, a boy named Alex, confessed to taking the painting. He claimed it wasn't theft, he only wanted to borrow it temporarily, intending to return it once he'd copied it onto canvas as practice. Alex showed me the replica he'd painted. It was impressive, capturing the essence of the original despite its amateurish flaws. Moved by his passion and remorse, I convinced Mr. Peterson to forgive him. In exchange, Alex agreed to volunteer at the gallery, helping with odd jobs and learning from Mr. Peterson himself. That case reminded me that not every crime stems from malice. Sometimes, people make mistakes driven by curiosity or admiration. Forgiveness can be a powerful tool, turning wrongdoing into opportunity. Another memorable case involved a missing dog named Max. His owner, a young girl named Lily, was inconsolable without him. Her parents hired me to track him down. After days of searching, I discovered that Max had wandered into a neighbor's backyard and gotten stuck in a shed. Reuniting Lily with her beloved pet brought tears to my eyes, not just hers, but mine too. These stories may seem small compared to the grand schemes of the world, but to the people involved, they're monumental. That's what keeps me going, the knowledge that even the tiniest victories can change lives. Being a detective has taught me patience, perseverance, and empathy. It's shown me the beauty of humanity, even amidst its flaws. And most importantly, it's given me purpose. So, whether I'm chasing clues, questioning suspects, or comforting victims, I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. And that's my life as a detective, a life filled with challenges, triumphs, and endless possibilities.